We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Gimel Amid Beis Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 23b. This daf is sponsored by David Grossman. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you'd like to sponsor a number of daf, see the description box below, and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amid, the Gemara was discussing the machlokas in the Mishnah with regards to whether a litigant is able to disqualify a witness that is being brought against him. Rabbi Meir says that the litigant is able to disqualify the witness, and the Gemara asked, how can that be? How can a litigant disqualify a witness that's being brought against him? And the Gemara suggested we're talking about a situation where the litigant actually accepted just one witness as though he were two witnesses. Really, one witness is not sufficient. You need two witnesses in order to take away money from someone. But this litigant said, I accept one witness as though he's two witnesses, and now he wants to retract, and that's all that Rabbi Meir is saying. Rabbi Meir is saying is if the litigant wants to retract and say he's no longer accepting this witness as two witnesses, that is okay. And the Gemara in the previous Amud, they brought the Mishnah that's coming up. The Mishnah says that if a litigant says, I trust my father, I trust your father, I trust these three cattle herders, so then he's allowed to retract. If he wants to retract and say he no longer trusts them to be judges, he's able to retract. And the Gemara now continues, V'yamar Rav Dimi b'reider Rav Nachman b'reider Rav Yosef, and Rav Dimi, the son of Rav Nachman, the son of Rav Yosef, said on that Mishnah, what are we talking about? Kigon de kible ale b'chad. What we're talking about here is that he accepted his father or the other person's father as one of the three judges. And Rashi explains, V'yamar Rav Dimi, and Rav Dimi says, Hadakatani nemon olai abba. When we're talking in the Mishnah later on, where the litigant says, "I trust my father," kagon de kible oleh b'chadayin. What it means is that my father can be one of the three judges. V'yeshnayim kasher nimo. There's going to be two other kosher judges with him. V'afilu hachi kevan de pasal midoraisa. And nevertheless, since having a judge who's a relative is pasal on a doraisa level, matzi hader bey. That litigant is able to retract. He can change his mind, and that's exactly what's happening here as well. Hachanami here also. Kevan dechad lamaman lo miskasher. Since one witness is really not good in terms of taking away money from someone, so matzi hader bey. So he is in fact able to retract. The two Mishnahs are talking about essentially the same basic scenario. And the Gemara continues and says, if it's really true that the two Mishnahs are talking about the same basic scenario of retracting when the litigant initially accepted upon himself something that's not kosher on a doraisa level, so it's necessary to have both Mishnayos, even though they seem to be discussing the same basic point. The itana abba v'avicha, because if we just had the Mishnah coming up that I accept my father or your father as a judge, so b'haka amri rabbanon, over there the rabbanon say Delom Motzi Hadar Bey, that he's not able to retract. Again, it's Rabbi Meir that says he can retract, but the Rabbanan say no. And the reason why the Rabbanan say there you cannot retract, Mishum Da'aba V'yavicha Chazul Li'alma, because my father or your father, they could be judges in any other case. We're talking here just because they're related to us that they're disqualified, but they're not inherently disqualified to be judges, and that's why the Rabbanan say he can't retract. Aval Chad Kebei, but if a person accepts one witness as though that witness is two witnesses, the Li'alma Lo Chazi, so one witness is not fit in general, so I might say that the Chachamim would actually agree to Rabbi Meir that over there the person could retract, and then you can go the other direction as well. V'yashmin and Baha kam Rabbi Meir. If we only had this case, I would say Rabbi Meir only says you can retract again in a situation where the person is disqualified across the board. Aval Bahi, but in a situation like my father or your father being a judge, where it's possible that they could be a judge in another case with other litigants, Ema Modu L'Hu Rabbanan, I might say that Rabbi Meir admits to the Rabbanan that there's no retracting. So tzricha, that's why it's necessary to have both Mishnayos. But the Gemara continues, Hamidiktani Reisha, but from the fact that in the beginning of our Mishnah, it says Dayano, it says that the litigant is going to disqualify the other one's judge, it says it in singular, V'seifa Eidav, and then at the end of the Mishnah talks about disqualifying his witnesses. Al Madafka Katani, don't we see from that it really is supposed to be in plural? We're not talking about a case in the Mishnah where he's disqualifying one witness, where initially he accepted one witness as though that witness were two witnesses, and then he's taking it back. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that we are talking about two witnesses, and Rabbi Meir is saying that the litigant can actually disqualify these witnesses. So again, we're back to our question, how can it possibly be that Rabbi Meir holds that a litigant can disqualify witnesses that are being brought against him? And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rebbe Lazar says, Bebohu v'yacher leposlan. What's happening is, he's coming together with someone else to disqualify that witness. But the Gemara still asks, Kol kamine, is he really able to testify against a witness that's against him? No geya be'idusa, who in such a situation, he has a conflict of interest, so of course he can't can't do that. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Acha B'rei Ravika, Rav Acha, the son of Ravika, says, Kagon Shekara Olav Ir. The case over here is that he has some kind of specific protest. But the Gemara continues, Ir Demai, what exactly is the protest? Ilema Ir de Gazlanus, if you say that he's saying that this witness can't be a witness because he's a thief. Again, Kol Kamine, is he able to say that against a witness that's brought against him as a litigant? Nogea Be'edusa, who again, he has a conflict of interest. Of course he's not allowed to testify against that witness. Ela Ir de Pegam Mishpach. Rather, the Gemara says what he's protesting is that there's some kind of blemish in the family. And the issue is as follows. Rabbi Meir Savar, Rabbi Meir holds, Hani HaMishpacha Kamisadi. What they're really testifying is not about this particular witness, but it's about his whole family. V'iyu Memela Kapasul. And then Memela automatically, along the way, this aid becomes disqualified. And so therefore, Rabbi Meir says that the litigant is allowed to do. For Rabbanan Savri, but the Rabbanan holds, sof at the end, Nogeya Be'edusahu, he still has a conflict of interest, so he's not allowed to protest in this manner. And Rashi explains, Alma Davka Katani, from the fact that the Mishnah changes from singular to plural, you see that we really are talking about witnesses in plural. Midashani b'milsei devidayonin nakat lashon yachid, from the fact that in the beginning of the Mishnah, when Rabbi Meir says the litigant can disqualify the other person's judge, it's stated in singular. Uve'edim nakat lashon rabim, and then by the witnesses it's in plural. V'lesa l'dreish lakish, and so therefore it seems that we're not holding like Reish Lakish that we're talking here, where he accepted one witness as though he were two. V'hadra koshen l'duch, and therefore our original question comes back. Trying to disqualify witnesses against you, that's like disqualifying expert judges. Again, this entire discussion on the previous Amud started with a discussion about how can he disqualify a judge. There was a suggestion that we're talking only about disqualifying erchos shebesurya, unqualified, non-expert judges. But again, now it seems like Rabbi Meir is even going so far as to say you can disqualify witnesses, so we're probably talking about expert judges as well. And the Gemara then answered, Amar Rabbi Elazar says, no, the case by witnesses is when he's coming with someone else to disqualify those witnesses. The Havalu trade the Misadi Apsula. Now you have already two people testifying on the disqualification. Umehemni, and they're believed. V'dayanin, and then the first part of the Mishnah that's completely unrelated by judges. Berchos shebesurya kedukimna. That's talking about erchos shebesurya, which were judges that were not experts. V'lopsol mamish. That's not even talking about real disqualification. Ka'amar. That's not what it's saying. Ela ba'ina beidina ma'alya. Rather, it just means to say that the person can say, I don't want to have erchos shebesurya, I want to have a real court. But the Gemara said still doesn't make sense, even if he's testifying with someone else. Nogeya be'eduso, who he has a conflict of interest. Hai baldin de mishum de lo lisar Allah, ka'asil lemifsale. Of course, he's disqualifying the witness because he doesn't want the witness testifying against him. And the Gemara then said, Shekara olav irir. The case over here is that there was a protest. Baldin omer lefanenu, meaning the litigant is saying in front of us, al mahu posel, saying what the disqualification is. V'yesh acharim, and there's somebody else saying that as well. Ir shemetz shel psol, again a specific disqualification. But the Gemara still asked the Gazlanus, if he's claiming the guy's a Gazlan, made all of huvi achash a Gazlan, who the litigant and someone else are testifying that this witness is a Gazlan. Nogea beidusa, who again he has a conflict of interest. Mishum delo nasid ala kamer. He's just saying that because he doesn't want there to be testimony against himself. And the Gemara then said, the pegam mishpach. We're talking here where he's saying there's something wrong with the family. Eved humi mishpachas eved. He's a slave. He's from a family of slaves. Shalom Nishtachar wasn't freed. Ba upasul hum umishpachto, and they're trying to say he comes from that family. He and his family are disqualified. And so the machlokas is that considered testimony against the family or the individual? Amishpacha kamesadi. Rabbi Meir says he's really testifying on the family. V'la mishum hayla chudei mesadi. It's not just this person he's testifying against. Hilkach sadusa achrinu. Therefore, it's considered an unrelated kind of testimony. V'lav kenogeya be'edus dami. It would not be considered a conflict of interest according to Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara continues with another approach to the machlokas in the Mishnah. Ki asur Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Rav Dimi came, he said that Rabbi Yochanan said, machlokas b'shtei kitayedim. The machlokas in the Mishnah actually is when the litigant is bringing two sets of witnesses, and now this other litigant wants to disqualify one of the two sets. The Rabbi Meir holds tzarich levar, that if a person says he's bringing two sets of witnesses, he has to clarify that. He actually has to follow through and bring both sets of witnesses. For Rabbanan Savri, and the Rabbanan hold eino tzarich levar, that the person does not need to clarify. Avol bekasa achas, but let's say you have just one set. Divrei hakol, everybody agrees. Ein yachol, the post on a litigant is not allowed to disqualify that one set. And Rashi explains, Machlokas b'shtei kitei edim, the Machlokas in the Mishnah is by two sets of witnesses. Sha'amar baldin b'fanenu, the baldin, the litigant says in front of us, Yeshli shtei kitei edim b'davar zeh. I have two sets of witnesses for this. Hevi kasri shona v'yamar halova v'acher v'yamar psulin hen. And then what happened is, this person who said he has two sets, he brings one set of witnesses, and the borrower and another person get up and they say that set of witnesses is disqualified. Dahashda lav kenogeya be'edusu. Now we can say that he's not considered to be that he's a conflict of interest. Shari amar malva sheyesh lo kasacheres, because the lender says he has another set of witnesses anyway. V'mbikesh v'lo motza yapsid, and if he goes and doesn't find that other set, he'll lose out. And what's the source? What's the root of the machlokas? To kasavar Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir holds sarach baldin levarer ulahamed alo emes kol devarav. The litigant, he needs to clarify and make true everything that he said. Shatoin bebezin, every claim that he made in court. Vahani mifsali afla ed yosacheres, and now this set that has been disqualified, they'll be disqualified for future testimonies. V'imbikesh umatza kasacheres ksheir, and if he goes and finds another set, they'll be kosher. Afal bisharishon and nifsali, even though that first set was puzzle. Hare birer devarav, and now he's made his words true. Sha'amar lahavim, he said he was able to bring a second set. Vehevi, and he brought them. V'hulo duck to savar sheksherim hayu. Now he thought that they were both kosher sets of witnesses. It turns out that the first set was not kosher. But the point over here is that Rabbi Meir says the litigant can disqualify that first set because it's incumbent upon that other litigant to bring his second set if he said he had a second set. And therefore that first litigant who disqualifies the first set of witnesses, he's not considered to have a conflict of interest because we know there is a second set that is waiting to come. V'Rabbanan Savri, but the Rabbanan hold, Ein Tzarech Levari, there's no need to clarify, there's no need to follow through, so to speak. V'Yachol Omar, Ein Liot, he can say, actually, I don't have any other witnesses. V'Nimtza Zen Nogea Be'eduso, now if that's true, it turns out that the litigant who's disqualifying the set of witnesses, he has a conflict of interest, V'Lo Mifsali Af Be'edusu, and therefore they will not be disqualified at all, even for this testimony. And we will note that Rashi actually rejects the girsa of our Gemara and presents a different girsa. Rashi here continues, Hilkach, therefore, Omer Ani, I say, the Garsin and Hachi V'Huikr, that the proper text is as follows. The Rabbi Meir Savar Ein Sarach Levar, that Rabbi Meir holds, not that Rabbi Meir holds Sarach Levar, Rabbi Meir actually holds Ein Sarach Levar. He doesn't need to follow through. V'Zesh Amar Lahavi Shtei Kitei Edom, the litigant that says that he has two sets of witnesses, V'Havim, and he brings two sets, V'Achas Nefsalas, and then one is disqualified, Ein Bekach Klum, that's not a big deal. Sheino Sarach Levar Dvar, he doesn't need to follow through. V'Dayo Bekas Achas Aksher, and it's enough if he has one set that's kosher. Ve'Elo Nefsal and Leidas Acheres, and the one that's puzzled, they'll be totally disqualified. Al Pi Baldin V'Acher, through the litigant and somebody else. De'eno Nogea Be'edus, and therefore he's not considered to have a conflict of interest because there is another set that's right in front of us that is kosher, and the fact that he disqualifies the first set, that's irrelevant to the case against him. That's what Rabbi Meir holds. For Rabbanan Savri, but the Rabbanan hold on the contrary. It's Sarach Levar. If the person says he has two sets, it means that he has to follow through and he has to have two kosher sets. V'nimtza zen nogea be'edus, so it comes out that this person really does have a conflict of interest, because if he's going to come along and disqualify even one of the sets, it means that the litigant is not properly following through on what he said. V'lo mifsal, and therefore that first set is not disqualified at all. And then the Gemara continues, nimtzis kas shniya, krov and opsulin, and let's say it turns out that the second set, their relatives are they're disqualified, l'Rabbi Meir mahu, so then the Gemara is going to ask, according to Rabbi Meir, what would be the halacha? Nihide in sarach levar, granted that you don't have to follow through, mikol makom achshav ein kanedus, but now that you've already disqualified the second set, now there's nothing left if you're going to disqualify the first set as well, and therefore retroactively there really is a conflict of interest. At the time that he testified, it's not a conflict of interest, because at that point in time the second set was not disqualified, as we will now see in the Gemara. And the Gemara continues, Rav Dimi continues his report, Amru lefanav Ravami v'Ravasi, Ravami and Ravasi, they said before him, they responded to Rabbi Yochanan, Ein shama lakas achas ma, well, what if there only be one set of witnesses? Could the litigant be involved in disqualifying this set of witnesses that's trying to testify against him? And the Gemara immediately asks on this, Ein shama lakas achas, what do you mean they're asking if there's only one set? Rabbi Yochanan just said that if there's only one set of witnesses, there's no machlokas. V'amr, but Rabbi Yochanan just said, Aval bekas achas, that if there's just one one set of witnesses. Divrei hakol and yochel apostle, and everybody agrees that a litigant is not allowed to be involved in disqualifying one set of witnesses against him. So what are they even asking on Rabbi Yochanan? And so the Gemara continues. Their question is as follows, and this is what Rashi just mentioned. Ela nimzes kas shenia kroven opsulin. If after they testify, after the litigant disqualifies the first set of witnesses, then we find out that the second set are relatives or they're disqualified, mahu, what would be the halacha in that case? Because now it turns out that retroactively he really does have a conflict of interest. So would Rabbi Meir say then that we have to go back and say that that first set is not disqualified? And the Gemara says, Amar Lehen, he said to them, Kfar heidu edim harishonim. There already was that first testimony. You can't go back on testimony. Ika diamri, there are those that say, Amar Ravashi. That Ravashi says, Kfar heidu edim harishonim. That again, the first witness has already testified. You can't go back. And Rashi explains, Kfar heidu harishonim. The first witness has already testified. What exactly does the Gemara mean? Kishenimtzes kas shenia psula. At the time later on that we suddenly find out that the second set of witnesses is actually disqualified. Kfar niskabla bekashras edusin shel elu hameidin al apsul. We've already accepted the disqualification of the first set. V'adayin lo haya nogea be'edus, and therefore he's still at that point in time there was no conflict of interest. Ume'achar sheniskabla v'hechsher ne'emonin lifso lesrei shonim. Once we already said that first set is already disqualified. That's Rashi's first understanding of what it means kvar heidu harishonim. Rashi offers a second explanation, but in the end Rashi accepts this first explanation. And the Gemara continues, Nema beplugsa de Rebbe v'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel kamiflagi. Let us say that the machlokis in terms of tzarech levarer or eino tzarech levarer, that's the same machlokis as we find in a braysa between Rebbe and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. The Tanya, because we learned in a braysa, habolidon b'shtaru v'chazak. If somebody is coming to court in terms of a piece of land and he has both a shtar, he says he has a document that proves the land is his, and he also has a chazaka, he's been on the property for 3 years. Nidon b'shtar divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says that we adjudicate the case with the shtar, with the document. As we will see, the document is really the main piece of evidence. A chazaka really follows from the shtar. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Nidon b'chazaka, we judge the case with chazaka. And the Gemara immediately asks on Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, v'havinan ba, we ask on Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, b'chazaka v'lo b'shtar, is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel saying that you have to use the chazaka and you can't use the shtar? That doesn't make any sense. The shtar is certainly the stronger piece of evidence. Ela ema af b'chazaka, rather what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel means is that you can use either or. You can either use the shtar or use the chazaka. But Rebbe is saying you have to use the shtar. That's really tzarech levara. You have to use that stronger piece of evidence. The Kaim and we established if it's tzarech levara pligi, they're arguing about the issue of tzarech levara. Meaning to say again, Rebbe says tzarech levara, and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says you can use whatever you want. And the Gemara says, lo, no, it's not necessarily the case. You can't say that the machlokas by shtar chazaka is the same thing as by two sets of witnesses. And the Gemara explains, Aliba de Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Now, according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that you can use either or, you can use the chazaka or the shtar, kuliyal malo pligi, there actually is no machlokas. It is clear that Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is saying, eno tzarech levar, he's even allowing you to just use the chazaka. Ki pligi aliba de Rebbe, but there could be a machlokas even within the sheet of Rebbe. The Rebbe Meir ka Rebbe. Now, Rebbe Meir, he'll just follow Rebbe. Rebbe is saying, tzarech levar, you got to use that stronger piece of evidence, and Rebbe Meir will say that as well. For Rabbanan amri lach, but the Rabbanan, they will say to you, ad kan lo ka'amar Rebbe hasam ele b'chazaka. Rebbe only said when you have a situation of chazaka and shtar, so there we say that demikoach shtar ka'asi, the chazaka is just coming from the strength of the shtar, so of course you have to present the shtar. There, that's what Rebbe would say. Aval hacha, but over here it could be different. It could be even Rebbe would agree when it comes to two sets of witnesses. A person comes to court and says, I have two sets of witnesses. Dahani edim, lav mikoach edim achrini ka'asu. These edim are not dependent on the other edim. It's just two separate sets of witnesses. So there already, afilu Rebbe Mod, it could be that even Rebbe admits, de'eno tzarech levar. You don't need to be mevar, meaning to say you don't actually have to follow through and bring both sets of witnesses. And of course, we will note over here that the Gemara is following its own girsa, that Rebbe Meir holds tzarech levarer, and that's why the Gemara said, Aliba de Rebbe Meir ka Rebbe. Rebbe Meir is following Rebbe again, who says tzarech levarer, but Rashi notes, according to his preferred girsa, you would reverse this Gemara and you would say that the Rabbanan are the ones that are like Rebbe, and Rebbe Meir would respond that I can say even according to Rebbe. And the Gemara continues, Kiyasa Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Ravin came, he said that Rabbi Yochanan says, Reisha, the beginning of our Mishnah, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Dalid Amud Aleph.